This one we're talking about John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. We're just gonna kind of go through a few things. Maybe roll this into a two-part video because we've got quite a lot to say on this one, don't we?
Yes. You ask me questions. I'm drinking, you bastard.
Well,
drink candy just in case the computer game I'm playing fucks with me, so I can pour it over the computer. Yeah. Cheating bitch.
Yeah, exactly. So, as usual, this is Halloween itself, Halloween day, Halloween night, should I say, that this goes out. So, you're going to be preparing some Thing quotes for me with Buff and Topher in there as well. So, we'll save that for the end of the video. But for now, anyway, we're just going to do a 3-minute video, let you finish your drink as well, because that's how this works. And we'll come back. So,
yes.
Here it is.
Okay, so for the 8th annual Brandex Reviews Halloween special series, I wanted to talk about a film that I thought is a really good one, a really special movie, and not just to me, but to a lot of people. I think you'll find that a lot of people that are just sci-fi horror film fans in general will really highly regard John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. Now, we're going to have a bit of a chat about this, but for this intro here, let's just cover the history of it. It's based on a short story called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr. Now, that book was later made into a film called The Thing from Another World in 1982. Now, that film was one that was directed, well, it wasn't directed by Howard Hawks, but he had a big involvement with it, and he was a film director that did westerns, and this film kind of has that kind of feel to it. But it's very good. James Arness plays the Thing itself, kind of Frankenstein's monster thing. But 30 years later, anyway, John Carpenter, who loved that film, remade it effectively, and he kind of went back to the original source material, the book, Who Goes There. Now, the film itself was very poorly received by the critics. Now, it had some stiff competition in 1982. That was like a really good year for films. And obviously E.T. was probably the biggest in a number of ways. And in contrast to that, you've got this film, The Thing, which is a very kind of nihilistic and gory and maybe cynical movie, and kind of deals with the end of the world effectively. So I think in contrast to E.T., it just really wasn't appreciated at all. It wasn't until it kind of found its audience in the home video market that it really picked up. I was kind of born around the time this film came out. I think I was like 1 year old when this came out. And obviously, in the years since then, we'd recorded it off TV. And I remember I watched this when I was like 10 or something, and I was just blown away by it. And it's probably the first Kurt Russell film I saw, as well as being the first John Carpenter movie that I saw. I was very young to watch this, but my mother used to let me watch a lot of films like this. And when you're a kid and you watch it with your parents, you know it's not real, so whatever. But it really captured my imagination. And I remember when I first got a video recorder in my room, back in, I don't know, mid-90s, so I was about 14 or something. This was a go-to movie for me that I used to just watch like over and over again. It resonated with me, and I think that's the case with a lot of people. The fan audience for this movie is just absolutely, I say crazy, not in a bad way, but it's people love this movie like fans of Star Wars love Star Wars. I remember even in the early days of the internet as well, this movie had like a massive fan following. And there were all these websites in the late 90s that really went into depth on this. You could just get lost in these archives of fan theories and stories and just photo galleries, all that kind of stuff back in the early days of the internet. So quite an interesting history anyway, up to the present now. Beyond that, there was a kind of remake, but it was more of a prequel, to be honest, that came out in 2011. It's not great. I'd maybe recommend watching it, but there's a noticeable difference. There's a number of issues with that film anyway, but we're going to get into all this anyway and talk about what it is about this movie. So here goes. I've kind of rambled on for this intro. Here's our discussion.
So The Thing, 1982, one of my favourite films. What about you? You a big fan of this?
Yes.
And that's all we've got time for.
You gotta love these damn crazy Swedes, don't you?
The Norwegians, Carl.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe we're at war with Norway.
Exactly. So yeah, we're just kind of going through this because the cast on this film is fairly short, isn't it? There's not many people. Obviously, it kind of goes with the territory because they're isolated.
It's part of the strength of it because you can kind of, it's a very small, contained group, and you don't know who's, the whole paranoia of it kind of works better with that.
Yeah. And there's quite a bit of sort of animosity between a few of the characters as well, particularly Child, played by Keith David, and McCready, obviously Kurt Russell. And there's a few of the characters, obviously everybody's paranoid about Clark, the guy who looks after the dogs, because just in general he's a bit of a creep. But also he's like massively compromised because he's been left alone with the dogs, and it turns out that the dog is the first contact that they have is the thing as a dog, and they don't realize it. So
it makes sense. Like, if the thing got in the top, we'd be very suspicious of the both because they spend so much time together. It's like obviously he's been infected.
But yeah, well, that's another example of how the thing could work. There's all sorts of like fan theories as well. That's what I love about this film. If you go on YouTube, I mean, there's some channels like almost entirely dedicated to it. If you just look up like Thing theory, you'll find all sorts of stuff. And to me, it don't get too boring. I think this film, like, it really does kind of spin quite a web that you can really get into. The film itself really only scratches the surface. The sort of implications of having an organism like this, and how that would work, in real life, kind of thing. No pun intended there.
I know it's one of the strengths of the film, and it's kind of an intelligent film. You can actually sit down and analyze it, like, well, okay, who got taken? When it's not just like, yep, and this person's the thing now, even though there's no way that person has ever been alone long enough to be the thing. Like you'd get in some like stupider movies where it's like, oh, and this person was the alien monster all along. It's like, how the fuck does that work?
Yeah. So with this, a lot of it's left open to interpretation and your own kind of conclusions, especially the end of the film where you don't realise that the two survivors, either of them or both, could be but I don't think both would be, but either of them or neither of them could be the thing. There's all sorts of theories. You had a theory originally, didn't you, at the end? Because you can.
Well, it was kind of an urban myth that was going around because it wasn't just like, oh, it's something that I came up with myself. It's something that I've heard from several different sources, which got like, unfortunately, thoroughly debunked when we got better quality in like DVD and like Blu-ray and stuff. Because in the old crappy like TV and video quality, you can kind of see McCready's breath like billowing out quite noticeably, but you can't really see Child's because of the way it's lit. Like you can't see his breath like misting up in the cold. And so we're like, oh, I see, that's it. That Child's is the thing, And then you see it in like quality now, and it's like, well, no, obviously it is not the case.
Yeah, it was yourself that said that to me. I'd never noticed it. This was like late 90s, I remember. And so did you, I know it was already out there, but did you independently come up with that, or did someone else?
I'm pretty sure I heard it from Topher, and he'll have heard it from somewhere else.
So, yeah. Well,
you were talking about like how you first, you want to like explain how you first came across the thing and like, what? She's saying.
Yeah, I mentioned it in the intro video that I saw this when I was, I don't know, about 10 maybe. I know I was very young, and I wasn't aware of Kurt Russell at the time because I remember watching it and not thinking that's Kurt Russell. So I'd been quite young because I'd seen him in other stuff, like maybe by the time I was 11 or 12, like Big Trouble in Little China. But at this point, I didn't know who he was, and I never remember it like scaring me or like horrifying me or anything. I really liked it, and obviously it kind of. It was one that I watched a lot of time because my mother had taped it off TV sometime in the 80s. So yeah. But after that, I'd had it on tape throughout pretty much most of the 90s, and I remember it was one of the first DVDs because it's consistently been one of my favourite films. So it was Boxing Day '99. I remember I bought my first DVD player, and I was the first person I knew that even owned one. I think the lack of choice in Skipton, I think Out of Sight was the first film I ever bought when I bought a DVD player. But the day after, went into Leeds and got The Matrix because that was brand new out at the time, and I got The Thing. I don't know which side it's going to show on, but this was the DVD very similar to the American one, as far as I'm aware. I kept it, just sentimental reasons, and got a really nice inner sleeve with loads of artwork and so on like that. They put a pretty good thing together with this as well, because the set of extra features you get with this is really good, like deleted scenes and so on. I remember when we watched it, this was when we kind of debunked for ourselves the breath, the condensation theory, because clearly seeing this, he has got it. It's just he's in the dark. While we're talking about videos, later on, obviously, Blu-ray came along. I think when I first upgraded, I got this Thing set, which has both movies, the original 1982 one and the prequel / remake. Well, it's more of a prequel, isn't it? On there as well.
The Thing. Well, way to go on the fucking naming there.
Yeah. Then Arrow Video released a couple of years ago a really good version of it, and with some really good extra features. And there's some. What Arrow do is they don't just have like the studio putting a load of like studio made documentaries. They have like the fan community putting stuff together for these. So it's really well done. And obviously there's the original 1952 version. You can get this on Blu-ray. I need to get that because I've got this version on DVD. And it's got a colorized version on one disc, and it's got the black and white version with a commentary by John Carpenter on there as well on the other disc. So that's a really nice thing to have anyway.
Well, basically, how kind of joking about Topher aside, it was actually Topher that introduced me to the Thing. And this is not a buff joke. This is not like where this is going. But no, I can remember we'd be at secondary school, so I'd probably be a bit older than you were when you first got like introduced to it. And rather than renting it, he had recorded it off TV. Because I can remember watching it, and it obviously been recorded quite a long while ago. Because the adverts were literally like, "Oh, it's a commercial break. It's over in like 2 seconds, and you're straight back into the film." Like like commercial breaks being like minutes long. Like, fuck, can we just get back to what we were watching? This was like, yep, here's the adverts, and we're back into the film. So, fuck, that was quick.
I wonder if it was the same time as recorded as mine, because I remember, this is how often I remember the commercial breaks in the tape version I had, and that's why I say it was 80s, because I think back then they didn't used to show as many adverts. So it could have been
like over and done.
In fact, if it was the Topher, you'd probably stolen my videotape. That's probably why we're remembering them being very similar.
No, to be honest, in defense of the Topher, this is before he even met you, so unless he was randomly like raiding houses for... I mean, let's not rule anything out, but I think it's unlikely.
Well, I know ITV had license for the film, because I even remember Halloween. I specifically remember it was 98 because ITV did like a really good night of like horror. I think it was over a couple of nights over Halloween, and they showed loads of like stuff about alien documentaries and stuff. And there was that Roger Moore thing where he was in Russia, and we said he's not really there; it's a blue screen. But they also showed the Thing. Yeah. But yeah, was it that time when I was messing about with the dog? The dog was like in a sort of zonked out like state. She was like falling asleep, and I was like pretending that the dog was like made out of all sorts of different creatures. And I was like, "That's not dog, it's imitation." And you were like, "That's not how he says it in." Yeah,
it's not quite that much insanity, really.
So like, I think the Thing. Point being, obviously, the Thing was quite big. Like, gets brought up a lot of the time as well. But it has got a big fan following this as well.
And it deserves it 100%.
Yeah, it wasn't the case when it first came out, was it? Obviously, it was wasn't very well liked. So, I sort of, like I say in the video introduction, the Thing came out at the same time. Not the Thing. Did it? Did the Thing come out at the same time as the Thing? E.T. came out at the same time as the Thing, and obviously that was like a really big hit, but like polar opposite to this movie in terms of like the theme of it and everything. So I guess audiences just weren't really happy. It was the AIDS thing as well. People thought that it was some kind of like metaphor for the AIDS like pandemic, but truth be told, this film was written quite some time before that started, I think. So, well, in the public consciousness anyway.
I mean, plus when you go back to the origins of it with like the short story and stuff, it goes back like ages.
Yeah, that's one thing where the 52 version takes a lot of liberties. The short story, although I've not read it, I need to remedy that. To be fair, it wouldn't take a lot because it's a short story, so I really should do that. But the 52 film is more of a kind of like a, it looks like a Frankenstein's monster kind of thing, and it's basically he's like an organic, almost like a vegetable, but in a sort of humanoid form. I think they compare him to being like a giant carrot, where if you just shoot bullets in him, it's basically like holes drilled into like a vegetable. You know what I mean? It won't destroy it. Like, and they
It
end
kind
up
of feeds off
destroying it.
blood.
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah, so it's got some similarities to the 82 version, but ultimately they kill it by electrocuting it. And it's very cheesy, kind of the way that the sort of banter, and it's not sort of scary in that sense. But you can tell John Carpenter was a big fan of it because he put what was the film they were watching? Well, one of the films they were watching in the original Halloween film in '78 was The Thing. The kids are watching that on TV, aren't they? If you remember, that would have been good in the one of the. I know they're all crap, the ones that followed, but maybe like Halloween H2O, they could have had them watching like the 82 version of The Thing or something like that. But
I don't think that much thought went into any of the fucking Halloween sequels, to be honest.
What, you could have had Busta Rhymes like flipping channels and that have made the film any better? I don't think it would, to be fair.
I know, I think that was beyond saving.
But other aspects to the film as well, the score. I think I mentioned this in yesterday's video. I didn't know when we were talking about the Halloween 3 score. Very similar to this, but the score to this is very much a John Carpenter score when you listen to it, but it's actually not. It's Ennio Morricone who did the score to a lot of the Clint Eastwood ones quite famously. The spaghetti westerns, obviously, he's Italian with a name like Ennio Morricone. And I guess John Carpenter just felt like a lot of things were tying together in his career at that point. This was the first big studio movie that he'd done because he did it with Universal. And he got to remake this film that he loved, and he managed to get Ennio Morricone on board to do the score. And I think what happened is Ennio Morricone did his own score, and then John Carpenter wasn't all that happy with it and asked him to like redo it. So what Ennio Morricone did was he just basically listened to like John Carpenter's like actual stuff of his own and just emulated that. Did a very good job of it because it's pretty much it's a John Carpenter score. It's weird. You would have thought it was one of his. So it's interesting that worked out, but it is a good one. Have you seen Hateful Eight? Tarantino film. Interesting because that's Kurt Russell in it. It's a lot of guys like trapped in like a thing in the middle of massive barn in the middle of the snow, and they actually use. He's got Kurt Russell in it. He's got a massive beard as well. They actually use unused score from The Thing in that movie. It's weird. I was watching it. I was like, I know that music. Kind of weird. But I think what we'll do, because I can sense we've still got plenty more to talk about, should we cut this short here and then just do the part two? So what that means to you that are watching this, don't worry, part 1 and 2 are going to be uploaded at the same time. I'll either edit them together if I've got the facility to do that. If not, there's going to be 2 videos on the channel, both going up at 7 p.m. So I'll cut this short here. Right.